Hey everyone, so we decided to go ahead and continue recording some of these hands-on demonstrations dealing with this database class. This is chapter 15 in a Muroc textbook, ASP.NET 4.6 Web Programming with C Sharp 2015 6th edition. Right, so this is a chapter 15. This is more of a hands-on demonstration or a hands-on demo of the chapter, and I'm recording this so students can go home and watch this on YouTube, as opposed to just seeing it once in the demonstration and then forgetting how something might have worked. So this chapter deals specifically with the details view and the form view controls. So really, this chapter is over two controls, and whereas last chapter was mainly over the grid view, you're going to find out that these two controls are very similar to the grid view, and they're very similar to each other, but they have their differences. So if we look at, kind of the objectives, the specific objectives, we're going to learn this details view control, and we're going to find that it has a few different modes, and how do you set it in a mode, and what does it mean to have a mode. Some of the basic functions of details and form view, they can basically do the CRUD operations. So we're talking about the basic functions, all four of the CRUD operations. We're going to look at their events, um, such as what happens before an insert and what happens after an insert, and what is some programming that you might associate with those events. Some of the templates that you can use. So last chapter we learned about bound fields, and we also learned about the edit item template. And we're going to find that the edit item template as well as an insert item template, these are templates available for us to use, so we're going to use those templates. We're going to go through some basics and few small differences in how these controls differ, which kind of ties right into 6, how basically a form view control only works with templates. And then we're going to introduce a master detail page. Matter of fact, a master detail page, I'll develop one in this demonstration using a details view. And then after that, one of the labs is using a details view, and another lab has you incorporate the form view control. So basically you have two labs in this chapter, one of which is the details view control, another lab is the form view control. So you'll get pretty familiar with them both because you'll have labs over them both. This slide is a demonstration of what the book calls a master detail web page or website. And why they call it a master detail? Well, this control right here is a details view. Okay, and all a details view is one row of information. Okay, so think of a grid view. Think of a grid view with a lot of columns. And I think you guys have seen those before. You have these grid views where you have to side scroll to see all the information. And it's really too much to put in a grid view control because it's just a lot of information to the point you're side scrolling. It's not very user friendly. Okay, so if you really want to pinpoint one row of information, you can use this details view. Okay, but you have to select which row do you want to look at. And that's what this drop down list is. This is what they call the master part of the master detail, right? So you've got the master control, which is maybe a drop down list or a grid view control. A grid view can be used to select a particular row, and then all the information for that row is displayed in a details view. Okay, now kind of looking at this code, there's a lot of code in here, and I will demonstrate this, but I just want to look briefly at this code. You can see that the details view has a fields tag, and inside of the fields you have bound fields, right? That's just like your grid view control. There's really nothing too much different there. Inside of this first field, you've got a width of 125 pixels. That sets the width for all the other bound fields as well. So by setting the width up here to 125 pixels, you're setting the width for all of the bound fields. And then other than that, there's really not too much that's new. You've got this attribute here called data key names. What do you guys think data key names is? If you look here, this is the product ID. What do you think the product ID represents in that table? Yes, exactly, the primary key. Okay, so this data key names can be important so that your controls know what is the primary key. Because I want you to think about this for a second. In a minute, we're going to learn how to edit this information. Are we ever going to edit a primary key? No, you're just going to let the primary key remain the same. You might change the other fields about, in that table, but you're not going to be changing the primary key. So that's important that you list the keys, primary keys, in this data key names attribute. Okay, and then we get into the different modes of a details view, and I suppose this would be a good time as any to demonstrate a details view. So I was kind of practicing earlier, so I've got the solution already made for chapter 15. There's already got some code on it, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete everything because I'm going to recreate this here. So we really don't have anything. I'll take this out because I added this. Okay, and we can launch this page and see that we just have an empty site. The first thing is, okay, which database are we going to pull from? And for this example, you want to use Halloween?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what, this example, I'll use Halloween in my next example. Okay, just to demonstrate a different database as well. Okay, we got Premier, and inside of the Premier database, we have customers and orders. Okay, and they are linked through customer num is a primary key. Customer num is the foreign key here. Okay, so customers have some sort of orders. So to quickly put together this, what they call, again, a master detail page, I'm going to start with the drop-down list and using my shortcuts to generate a new data source. So this is going to take me through my SQL data source wizard, right? So we're going to add a SQL data source. I already have my connection to my Premier database. If not, you guys know how to go through new connection and connect into the database, or whether it's the file or it's actually on the server, on the SQL server. Okay, and really what I need is the customer number and the customer name. Okay, and you can see I've already modified this data. Matter of fact, this must be from a previous lecture because I got Alex down there. Is customer number 888, and I'm in there with my last name being plural. Okay, so my query works. I want to display the customer name in the drop-down list, but I want the value to be the customer number, right? And we're going to use customer number in the where clause of our next SQL data source. I'm going to enable auto post back because we're dealing with data in the database there in a drop-down list, and if I view my customers, we could see that it's working so far. Nothing new there. Okay, what is new though is my details view. And so if I collapse the toolbar under data, here's my details view, linking up to a new data source. So that's one thing that I don't know if we've done at this point, where we have multiple SQL data sources on the same page, right? This data source is for this data bound control. Okay, this data control is going to have a different data source. I'll even drag it on SQL data source is a long way. Configure the data source, same database, and I want to specify everything from orders where the customer number comes from a control called drop-down list 1 selected value. Okay, so again, this is the value part of why you want the number stored in the value, but you want the name to be displayed to the end user. So we go ahead and click add. Okay. Now, because I want to be able to edit new orders, I'm going to click on advanced, and under advanced you've got the options to insert, update, and delete. Now these are auto-generated, so if you don't want to write your own, you can come here. Now we've already written our own insert, update, and delete statements. You did that last week with stored procedures, so I know you all know how to do this. But for simplicity, if this gets the job done, then this will work. And anytime you're in here, I recommend using optimistic concurrency, and we've talked about the benefits of that. Okay, so we're going to select everything from orders where the customer number is the parameter customer number. We know that's coming from a control. And since I don't really know any customer numbers, I can't test the query. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the data source 2, which is this data source here. Okay, now you see we automatically have these nice checkboxes to enable inserting, editing, and deleting. So like the grid view could edit, the grid view could delete. What the grid view could not do was insert. So the details view has the ability to insert a new row out of the box, which is a very nice feature. Okay, so let's give this a shot, and so you could see I have at least one order. Now what I don't like about this is there's no paging, because actually I know I have multiple orders, and you can't see those right now because I don't have paging enabled. So again, very simply, let's edit paging. Now I've got the pager settings there. So if I view this in browser again, I can actually see I've got, and it always takes a second for whatever reason to respond here. Wait for it. There we go. There's my different order. Now it goes faster. So you can see the different information there. If I edit this, let's say this was from 2016. Order num 1131 is from 2016. 1131 from 2016, and I can kind of go back and forth. 1131 from 2016. If I were to go into the database, I would actually see that order number. Matter of fact, just to demonstrate it, we'll go into orders, show table data, order number 1131 from 2016. So it did update the database as we told it to. Now the whole reason for starting this was to talk about the modes, because that was the slide on the PowerPoint. So let me go into my properties window and show you these different modes. I'm going to expand this out a little bit more. So the primary key, the data key names, is order num. I'm not changing that. But what I'm looking for is our mode. There's our default mode. You can see the default mode is essentially read-only. It's essentially a read, right? We're reading data in this details view. If I go to edit, you can see that the primary key remains a label because we're not changing it. But the date is a text box. The customer num is a text box. The option then to update or cancel becomes the default mode for this control. If I view that in the browser, again, I can see maybe this one we want to change to 2015, and it's in update mode. And again, it always takes a second the first time I launch it. You can then guess if the insert mode was the third mode, you're going to get insert controls and insert. Scroll up to find this. Insert, so you get all text box. Now here's something that's interesting. If I go to insert, here's an error that I ran into originally. Let's just make up an order number because this is the primary key and it's not an auto incrementing primary key. So I put in a made up order number. I forgot my actual customer number. I need to know my customer number. View data. So 282 is my customer number. So let's try this again. View in browser. My order number, I made it up. Order date. Today is 4/11/2017, and my customer number is a valid customer number. And I go to insert, and what's going to happen here is it's going to crash. And the message is that the data will be truncated or cut off. Okay? And so what I found out is that basically my string would be truncated. So one of my fields was too long. And if I go back, I said, well, the date's a date. That's not really too long unless I wanted it in a shorter format. But I looked at the data and there were other dates in this format. So I knew my date was fine. I knew my customer number was correct. So come to find out my order number was too long. And if I were to cut that back, you see that it actually worked. Okay. Now if I go back and put this in a different mode. By the way, you can change the modes programmatically. You know, the easiest thing to do is keep it in read-only mode. But again, if you're in read-only mode, then you can switch to the different modes back and forth. Where this is really useful is if you just have a data insert page, right? And once you insert data, and that's all that page does, is inserts data. Then you could put a details view in for that particular table, and you could insert row after row after row after row, and there's your data insert page. Okay? But this is kind of one way you could do all the functions. I think I'm going to be record number 5.
That's it. 4 is it?
Isn't that the one that aired out?
No, 4.
4? Okay.
That's 5 right there.
The one that aired out was 159.159.
Oh, I had 6 digits. This is just 5 digits. So it must be less than 5 digits will work. 5 digits or less. No 6 digits. Okay. So there's my insert. There it worked. I can change my records, and you can see that really I'm the only one with multiple records. Some of them don't even have 1. This guy has 2. Okay. So going back to the original problem of, well, apparently there's a rule, a constraint on the database that says less than 5 numbers. 5 numbers or less. So no 6 numbers. And so maybe we want to put a required field validator on here. Which the case, if that were the case, you could definitely do that. Not required field, but maybe a range validator. And so the way to do that is edit fields. In your grid view, you edit the columns. In the details view, you edit the fields. And here's our order number, and convert it to a template field. And you guys, this is a similar process if you remember from last chapter. Convert it to a template field. And now we can edit the templates for the order number. And when we are inserting an item, we could put a validator control that's a range validator. And a range validator can say, okay, numbers greater than 0 or less than 10,000 or 99,999. So that's the largest 5-digit number. Okay, so setting this particular control, the control to validate will be text box 1. The minimum value will be 0. The largest value possible is 99999, because that's 5 numbers, 5 nines. That's the largest 5-digit number there is, right? And then the last thing to do is we have to say that the data type is integers, right? We're not trying to validate against strings. So there is a property here. There it is, the type. The type is integers. Okay. And that's all good. So let's go ahead and end the template. You know what? Let's just make it be a red star since this is a demonstration here. The text is a star. The color is red. End the template editing. Save it all up. View it in browser. Let's say new.
That didn't work.
The maximum value, 0, cannot be less than the minimum value. I did that backwards. So let's not do that backwards. Let's do that correctly. Insert item. Minimum 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a downfall of trying to go fast. And so now if I put in 6 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What was my customer number?
285? What was it?
282.
282. My bad.
Okay. You guys have seen this error message before, am I right?
Yeah.
You know, a couple ways to solve it. The quickest and easiest. Google it. Go to Stack Overflow. Copy this code into your web config. Right here. Launch it again. So just like your grid view, you can make the bound fields template fields by converting them. Always takes a second. 282 is my order number. Today's the date, 159159. And we get our little required field validator. Obviously, you want to be more descriptive than just having a red star. That would drive your end users nuts, but you get the point. Okay, So cancel, we're back. If I don't like this particular order number, we can delete it. Of course, now our grid view goes down to 2. So we've demonstrated edit, we've demonstrated new, we've demonstrated delete. Okay, just coming back from answering a few questions on this recording here. So not that I left off any particular place, so I guess it's a good time to go back to the PowerPoint here. We demonstrated the different modes. We've talked about all of these at one point or another. Now, we were talking about modifying when I paused. Modifying these controls through CSS can be difficult, right? Because like I was saying when I paused this video, is you want to add your classes to this property here, and then through your CSS try and make changes. That can be difficult. What's better is to change the style. What I shouldn't say is better. What is easier is to change the style of this through the properties itself. And that's what this slide is really all about. If you look here, alternating row style, edit row style, insert row style. So it's actually quite common using these .NET controls to change the look and feel of these controls through the properties, as opposed to changing it through CSS. One thing I want to point out, and I know I pointed this out before, these are server-side tags, ASP colon, but that's only run on the server. Any server-side tag is processed, if you will, on the server. That's not what is sent down to the client. What's sent down to the client in this case, when we're using a details view, you actually have an HTML table that's sent down to the client. So if I actually view this page in the browser and I inspect the code, we don't see any ASP tags here. You see a table tag, right? And inside of the table, you see table rows. Each one of these are table rows. And so you could target these table rows and apply Bootstrap classes to them and make it mobile responsive, you know. But I just wanted to show you that it doesn't send down server-side tags. It renders those tags and sends down HTML, which can be dangerous and has been dangerous in the past. Let's just say ASP.NET 3.0. One of the big downfalls of it was that it wasn't rendering clean HTML, and it would actually send down code to the clients that weren't valid. It was non-valid HTML code. It would not validate in your validator. It was not following some basic HTML rules. So that was a major complaint about these web forms, as they're called, several years ago. Okay, now it's been cleaned up a lot with HTML5 and the newer versions of .NET, but that at one point was a pretty big concern. Okay, so getting back into the PowerPoint, again, a lot of this was styles. The pager, if we look at these, you know, pager settings and pager style, I think those are worth pointing out. Those are kind of down here at the bottom. These were all these styles are at, all under the styles tab. And if you want to change these in here, you can go into each one and set the back color and fore color and add your classes here for Bootstrap. Most of the time in this class at least, I'm more concerned with the functionality as opposed to the looks and the style. We've covered CSS in another class, and so I'm not going to focus or hound you on that. I'm going to assume, maybe falsely assume, I'm going to assume you remember your CSS from second semester. So I'll try and show you kind of the different things. The pager settings, though. The pager settings. That's pager style. There's pager settings. You know, for example, you want to change the pager to be up at the top, right? So you can change top and bottom. So these are pager settings. How many number of pages to show down here, 1 through 10. If you want the mode to be something different, next and previous, next, previous, first, and last. And then instead of those being ampersands, the last page can say last. The first page can say first. The next page will say next. You know, so you can change all of these in pager settings. And then styles, pager styles, again, these are styles. These are what they look like. So the back color can be, oh, that's the border color. Back color, I meant. Back color. So you can change this to look however you want. Let me figure out why the first click takes so long. Obviously left one of these unchanged. Next, next, first. So you could change those to be more user friendly again. And then in the pager settings, the position, let's see. There we go. Horizontal align so that it's in the center. So lots of settings there, and I just demonstrated several of these. The header style, if you have a header on your control, we've covered that before. Most of the time, by default, your details view is going to have a bound field, a command field we left off, and we already covered the template field, but command field, that's what these are, edit, delete, and new. I can actually go into my source code and see that there's our command field. Okay, and you might realize this already, but there's a few different ways of setting that. If I go here, go back into design view, I just click these smart tags, but if I go to edit fields, I can go to my command fields, edit, delete, new and insert. You actually see it puts them on 3 different rows this time. If I look at the source code, you can see a little bit how that's different. That's 3 different command fields as opposed to just 1. But functionally does the same thing. Just puts it on 3 different rows as opposed to 1 row. So 2 different ways of doing the same thing. And we're about 33 minutes in, so I'm going to pause the video here for a break. It's a pretty good point. We already talked about the paging, allow paging to true. So I'm going to take a pause right here, and then we're going to review a master detailed page and what they typically contains when we come back. So go ahead and take a break here, at least on this video. Okay, coming back from break and just reviewing the master detail page. You know, the main thing is we're working with multiple data sources now, multiple controls. So, you know, 2 different data sources, which you'll read in these bullets. A details view control that is determined, showing data determined or based on a master control, which is typically a drop-down list or a grid view control. We've really covered all of this fun stuff. This add field dialog box, if you go to edit fields, you can do the same thing. You can add fields through the edit fields dialog box. This is just another way to add a field, and that's found off of the smart tag menu. However, there's nothing that I've found that you can't do here that you can do here. So I just generally I go to edit fields, and that works for me. There is some C# code that you can write that can suppress your ugly error messages. Kind of going back to the example before, if I edit my templates, insert item template, and I get rid of this field, I get rid of this that's validation control, and I launch this page and it crashes, you guys will remember a very ugly error message. And if I just go like this, okay. Now what this is, and maybe you realize it or not, but this is an exception, right? So going back to Java or C#, you had exceptions in those languages. Well, what happens in a web form is that you get the ugly, ugly exception stack trace that no end user would ever need to see all this, okay? And so we can give them maybe a portion of the exception message to give them a clue what might be going on, or we could write custom C# code. But either way, they don't need to see this. This doesn't help them. So the way to do that is if you click on the details view, and we got the properties over here, click the lightning bolt for the events, right? So this is properties tab, events tab. And just like we learned before, each event like deleted and deleting occurs right before the delete command, and deleted occurs right after. Okay, so what might you want to do before in deleting? These are your validation controls. What might you do after? Well, you might suppress your exceptions. And so you might also check for concurrency errors and things of that nature. So let's go to item inserted, and what you do here is you notice where I click. If you double click this text box, it generates the event for us. Okay, now I've seen enough students try to manually type this in. Remember, that doesn't work. Okay, so what we write here can help us suppress our exceptions so they don't crash our application, and check for concurrency errors. So this is roughly on page 551. You could see here that we have a details view inserted event args, and that's an object with the variable name of E. And so we can reference that E and essentially say if the exception was not null, meaning there was an exception, right, what are we going to do? And in this case, I'll just put a little label from the toolbox. And I'm going to not have it say anything here. And let's see, the label ID, just call it label results. And so if the exception is not null, label result.text equals e.exception.message. And so instead of crashing the page, we just put the exception in a label, and then we're going to go ahead and put the exception handled, set that equal to true, so again it doesn't crash. And we're going to keep in insert mode to true so that it does not keeps us in insert mode so we can insert a different piece of information. Now this isn't all that's on that page, and you can read more in the chapter about the other things that you can do. I'm just demonstrating this piece of it. If I view this in the browser, and we say new, and we put in a number that's too long in there, a valid date, the valid customer number, we go to insert. Now it no longer crashes our application. Instead, it just gives us a little bit of information. Now, an end user might not know what to do with this information either. But is this a more friendly way of handling our errors? Absolutely. Can you get this to say whatever you want it to say? You know, if you test for a certain condition, you could have a whole bunch of if-else's in there saying that if this is the message, you know, put a different, more friendly error message in there, you know? Again, or you could just put a validation control in there and fix that as well. And the rest of this, essentially, if the affected rows is 0, and we did this on the grid view, right? If the affected rows is 0, that's a concurrency error. Otherwise, do a data bind on your master control. This is a really important line because what this does is updates the master control. If you use the details view to insert a new row, you want your master control to reflect that. You want that information to be in the master control. So you do a data bind on your master control. This particular master control is called DDL products. Okay, so this line right here, this is kind of the one new line of C# that's definitely new to this chapter that I would pay close attention to, because you'll have to do this, you know, in lab, or maybe it's on your homework or anything like that. Okay, this is definitely something I've had to use before in my experience. This particular slide shows you a bunch of template fields and how these template fields can help you create a more user-friendly experience. For example, if you look at the category ID, now category ID is a foreign key. Okay, now do you think the end users are going to know the specific values of the foreign key? They're probably not going to know. So it makes more sense to put it in a drop-down list. Right? So put your categories in a drop-down list. So how do you do that? You use a template field. This long description, you got a little text box here that everything's clearly cut off. Well, go ahead and make that text box a multi-line text box so it's more user-friendly. Not to skip over this particular, but we talked about the different templates. The item template, the edit item template, and the insert item template are the most commonly used templates when you're inserting a new row, editing a row, or just viewing a row. Those are the common templates that you use for your template fields. Okay, I thought I'd take a minute here and just demonstrate this particular application. This is the product maintenance application. So I thought I'd whip this together real quick using a grid view and using a details view.
Isn't that the lab too?
This is not the lab, no. So let me go ahead and delete what I got here, delete my C#. Okay, and it starts with a grid view. Now this is from the Halloween database. So if I create a new data source from the Halloween connection string, which I already had this configured from earlier, all this information is in the products table, and this is the ID, name, and category. So we're going to select ID, name, and what is it, category ID. Since all this is being used for is to view data, I'm going to click Finish. And then I'm going to enable selection. That's going to put our little select option next to here. Then we're going to use this select to coordinate it with our details view. Okay, so now we have a details view. Again, I'm not staying focused on the style of this. You can mess around with that and get it to look how you want it to look. Right now I'm focused on functionality. I'm going to use the same Halloween connection string. Products. In this case, ID, name, short description, long category. I think that's selecting everything. Select everything from products where a product ID is equal to a control, the grid view selected value. Now if you look down here, we have the ability to edit, delete, and create a new. So in order to do that, we click Advanced and auto-generate our insert and update and delete statements. You don't have to use this. You could always write your own insert, update, and delete like we did in the stored procedures. But this is a nice thing to get it working out of the box. Okay. And now that we have a second SQL data source, I can use a details view. And I'm going to paging, inserting, editing, and deleting. And so to kind of quickly whip that together, you can always look up at this tab to see if it's thinking. Okay, so if I click on edit now, it puts us in edit mode. Say it has 105 on hand, update, and there it is. We have 105 on hand. You could go into the database and see the same information. Generate a new. Again, you could use templates. You could change this and make it, let's see. From earlier, I said testo1 just a test. So product IDs will be testo2, name just another test, test. Category ID is FX, that's your foreign key, so it has to be a certain value. $10,000 and we got 3 on hand. I click on insert. Now, it's not showing up right away. That's because, like I said before, we did not do the data bind, right? So if you do a data bind on insert on this grid view, that record would show up right away. But if I just refresh the page here, there's testo2. Okay, if I select it, I can delete it, and again, it goes away. Again, you have to refresh it because we're not doing the data bind. Just to demonstrate one more time how to do that data bind, I'll do item inserted, as in it just happened. An item's been inserted. Our grid view 1 dot data bind is all we have to write to bind a grid view after you insert an item. So let's view that in browser. And let's select an item. New. Product ID. We're just going to say Vader02. It is a costumes We have one on hand, insert, and then now you can see that that grid view updates right away since we did our data bind. This is just kind of looking at some of the code that's generated that you would see on mine. Really all that's left in this particular chapter is the second control. Now we spend a whole lot of time talking about that first control. The second control is a form view control, and you will have a lab on the form view control. The thing about the form view control is that it's all template fields. There's no bound fields. It's only template fields. And so if I delete this, if I delete my details view, and instead I drag on a form view. Where's my form view? There's my form view. Choose my data source 2. Because data source 2 is set up to edit, delete, and new, if you look here in our code, it actually generates quite a bit. We have an edit item template with just some regular, with a label, but it's just some raw code, right? It's not inside of a tag or anything. And we can move these around how we want to. If we want, for example, short description and category ID to be on the same line, we don't have to have a break. And so the thing about this is that it's not putting every individual field on its own row, like its own table row. And so what I just did is I put these two fields on the same row so you can put them right next to each other. Let's see, what did I go back to my source? Oh, I didn't save it. Save it. I need to do it on the item template. See, the thing that can be confusing is that you've got an insert item template and an edit item template and an item template. So let's say you want the product ID and the name. The item template's when you're just reading. See how product and ID or name are now on the same row. Because it's not in a table, you have a little bit more control over how things are and where they're placed. Okay, and you can see the product ID and the name, they're all right there, and it's all pretty basic out of the box. Okay, so really the main difference here, okay, is that these are all template fields. They're not an HTML table, okay? They're just, if you actually inspect this, you're not going to find a bunch of, it is a table, but it's all in one table row. And there's a bunch of spans. So you don't see a bunch of TRs for each field anymore. Okay, and you can edit. Now what's most commonly done is you get it set up for, you got these different templates, right? Item template, insert item template, and edit item template. You might get the item template how you want it. You know, configure all this item template and then copy and paste the code into the other two. Into the insert and into the update. Okay, so that's kind of a, unfortunately, there's no way around that. If you want all three of them to look the same way or similar, then you're going to be doing some copying and pasting potentially. Okay, or you can just manually edit each one. Okay, and again, there's nothing but templates. So, you know, there's no edit fields here. all I can do is edit templates. This is my item template. This is my edit item template. This is my insert item template. And you can customize them from here. You can customize them from the GUI, like so. Or, like I was showing before earlier, you can customize it from the code. Okay, and again, that just covers the difference between the two. The one thing I want to point out as well is when you see this eval is kind of a read-only method. So when you're evaluating the product ID, well, the product ID is your primary key. You're not going to be modifying the primary key. That's why you're just running the eval function on it. Bind is a two-way street. So if you change something on your web form, you also want to bind it to the database and back and forth. Okay, so eval is kind of a read-only type function. Bind is a two-way bind. Matter of fact, one question was asked, can you bind an image using the text rat.jpg? And yes, you can to actually show an image. And that's actually what's demonstrated is here. They're using the text for the name of the image and then actually displaying that image from the database. Okay, so that would be a good exercise to go back to and do this order page and see if you can't get all this information to show up. But as far as your lab, I'll go ahead and stop the video here. So we covered a lot of information over this details, views, and forms views, the different modes, the different functions of the controls, the different methods, the templates that you can use, how they're different, how to use templates for the form view, and a master detail page. So we covered a whole lot. These are going to be, at least for this class in 2017, you guys are going to be doing these two activities for your labs. Okay, and that'll be all your labs that are due for this week, these two activities. I'll go ahead and stop the video here. Please, what do they always say? Like, subscribe, and comment. Just kidding, you don't have to do that. Thank you. Bye.